today to have Arthritis Meggie, also known as Meaghan, also known as Meg, here for the Arthritis Life podcast. Welcome.
Hello. So glad to be here.
Yes, so glad to have you. And now that I've known you on Instagram, it's great to actually be able to talk live.
I know, I feel like I already know you.
Oh, totally, like longtime friends. So can you just let the audience know a little bit about, where you live and what your relationship to arthritis is?
Yeah, so I am born and raised Long Island, New York, from Manhasset, a little town, and I still live on Long Island, a little further bit out east now in West Hampton. Spent some time living in New York City, which was a fun experience. And I was diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis at age 2 in 1995, way back when. And over the years, my arthritis changed a little bit. There were some hiccups in my treatment, and I ended up being diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis in 2019. And
Yeah.
most recently, I've started getting into the advocacy world and writing for Busy PSA.
Yeah, I love that. There's a Bezzy is from Healthline,
Yeah.
right? And they
Mhm.
have it's like an app that they have there's one Bezzy RA, which I do some writing for sometimes.
Mhm.
And that's amazing. We can talk more about that later. But I do actually, we always take some time to talk about people's diagnosis story / diagnosis saga. So I know when you were 2, I'm guessing it was a little more straightforward, but I
Yeah.
remember reading on your page about what happened when you started feeling some joint symptoms and other things again. And what was that like when you finally got that diagnosis of PSA? I know that there were some barriers.
Yeah, it was crazy actually. And it's really what has inspired me to talk so much about my diagnosis process, because even with the history of JIA literally on all of my records, I still was gaslit, like beyond, by doctors being told that's tendonitis, you should work out less, try physical therapy, it's isolated, it's just your knee, oh, it's just your elbow. It took 8 years between when my symptoms started reoccurring when I was 19 until I got my PSA diagnosis. And it was a lot of, unfortunately, older male doctors who were looking solely at my blood work and nothing else.
Wow.
Yeah, quite unfortunate.
Well, and that's always surprising to me because well, not the old white male part, because that's pretty well documented, but especially if you have a history of JIA, like I was always taught, like, and I don't diagnose as an occupational therapist, but I was taught that the diagnosis for an inflammatory arthritis or autoimmune arthritis like PSA, of psoriatic arthritis or rheumatoid or the spondyloarthropathies or ankylosing spondylitis, there's like 4 pillars, right? You have blood work, and you have the patient's like physical presentation, so you have to like they feel your joints and feel like redness, warmth, swelling, tenderness, and then your subjective report, like that's another pillar. That's not just like a
Right.
random icing on the cake. That's like
Yeah,
important.
very.
Yeah. So, and then there's your personal and family medical history. So you had
Yeah.
like 3 of the 4 pointing to PSA. And can you tell the audience, because I know a lot of people, they might be some people listening might not even, be in the pre-diagnosis stage where they feel like you were for those 8 years,
Right.
like something's wrong, but I don't know what it is. And people are telling me it's not inflammatory arthritis, but maybe it's in the really early stages. Like, what were your symptoms of PSA?
Sure. So for me, it was, the other tricky part was I was a freshman in college. So much of my life had just changed at that time.
Yes.
So the fatigue that I was experiencing, some of the brain fog, having like emotional reaction, that all was kind of getting mixed up in just being, out of in a new place. My dorm room was on the 4th floor. There was no elevator. So when my knees started hurting, I was like, oh, I bet I'm overdoing it. And when I went to the doctor and was told you're overdoing it, I said, okay, you must be right. Um, but now, years gone by, and I think back to those appointments, I knew I should have known better. They should have not gaslit me, but also at the same time, I had a lifetime of rheumatology experience. I have been seeing a rheumatologist since I was 2 years old. I know the musculoskeletal, they go through and they have you move this joint this way and this joint that way. And I have like the muscle memory, literally. I go to the doctor and my body just starts doing those things that they do to you. And I would go to those appointments in those early, in my early 20s, And it was just such a strange shift for me between peds and, and adult rheumatology. It was almost like there was such a disconnect. I had been given such amazing medical care from 2 to 18 under my peds room, who always took me seriously, always listened to my concerns. And then I stepped foot into an adult rheumatology office and I was like, looked at like, why are you here?
Wait, so
So,
did your symptoms, because I know that for people who don't know, juvenile idiopathic arthritis is much more likely than the adult inflammatory arthritis is to go into remission. It
mhm,
doesn't go into remission for everyone, but if you have juvenile idiopathic arthritis, some kids, quote unquote, grow out of it. So
right.
how
That's
were
what I
your
was
symptoms?
told.
Okay. And so,
They were
and
telling me, you grew out of arthritis. This is an arthritis. Stop
wow.
working out so hard. Do some physical therapy.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's really sad because we know, like health providers know what the risks are of uncontrolled inflammatory arthritis. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
anyway,
so by
obviously
the
preaching
time
to the
I got
choir.
to, yeah, so it took, I mean, when I saw a rheumatologist right when I was 19, he told me, okay, go to PT. I listened. I saw another
Mhm.
one a couple of years later, just checking in again. Something still didn't feel right. Again, was told probably just tendonitis. You're very healthy. You're in good physical shape, yada, yada. I appeared healthy, which is
Mhm.
part of the issue a lot of us deal with. It
Yeah.
wasn't until I was 24, I had such an intense full body flare. I was having
Yeah.
like high fevers. I couldn't walk. All of my joints were so swollen on the left side of my body. I couldn't like feed myself. Um, so that's when I was diagnosed with inflammatory arthritis. Finally,
Right.
somebody was like, yeah, something's up here.
Yeah,
And
this
I
is
was put
not
on,
just an injury. I mean, like this is,
right.
yeah, and
This
like,
is systemic. Yeah.
yeah,
It
I
took
think,
it took until it was absolutely catastrophic to be taken seriously, which is unfortunate. But at that point, they put me on just methotrexate. And I had a rheumatologist who was like fresh out of med school and she was lovely. She really listened, but she didn't have the best experience, I don't think. She did not tell me how vital it was to take the folic acid along with the methotrexate. And my
oh,
side effects were awful. I gave up within, I think, 10 weeks. I said, I can't take this. I
yeah.
don't have like a real diagnosis. This medicine makes me feel sick. So I went the holistic route,
Mhm.
thinking because I at that point I started to internalize all of this. I was like, what am I doing wrong? Why am I feeling so sick? I was just so overwhelmed. So I enrolled in like a holistic health program and I learned about inflammatory diets and autoimmune paleo. And I did a few of those things. I changed my diet and it helped, better word, for a few months. And then I had yet another massive flare up. Went to another rheumatologist. This time I took the time to research um, a female experienced rheumatologist. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to see somebody that had been doing this for a little while, and that was a woman that might listen to me. And I showed up to that appointment with pictures of my swollen joints, journals of all of my symptoms. I was like ready to fight. And she took one look at me and my medical history. She looked at my family history. First person to look at my family history. She goes, your maternal grandmother had psoriatic arthritis and psoriasis, and nobody has ever mentioned this to you as a possibility. She was like, you
Wow.
have psoriatic arthritis, you have enthesitis, that's the pain that you're having in your elbow. That's what's going on here. And she seemed so disappointed in her field, like for me. She was like,
Yeah.
please don't show me your photos. You have nothing to prove to me. We're gonna get this sorted. And she got me on Humira within, I think I started Humira the next day. She was like, let's get
Wow.
on this because at this point you've had 8 years of your body, your disease getting smarter, learning how to work around medications. It's gonna be a struggle to get this under control. You have to like prepare yourself. This is going to be tough because it
Yeah.
had ravaged my body for like almost a decade. And I'm
Oh,
still, this was 2019. I'm still kind of working my way out of that, like, never ending flare.
yeah.
Um, so that's why I'm so passionate about talking about psoriatic
Yeah.
arthritis, because I think that it's a lot to do with a lack of awareness, just overall. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Before I saw that doctor, I myself had no idea that you could have psoriatic arthritis without active psoriasis. Didn't think it was
Yeah.
possible. But as long as you have that family history, it's absolutely a possibility.
Yeah, no, that's really, really important. I just want to stay on this topic of your diagnosis experience, because I'm curious emotionally what you felt like. I mean, I obviously it sounds like you really liked that the female rheumatologist who gave you your
Yes, she
diagnosis.
was
That's how I
great.
felt too. But something that it took me, it wasn't until my first flare up that I then started really okay, I don't want to make this all about my story, but long story short, like once I had another flare up and kind of really understood, because for me, I didn't understand really the disease that
Yeah,
in that much
the
detail.
gravity of it.
Yeah, the gravity of it. I got diagnosed. I got put on Enbrel. I felt
Mhm.
amazing. I was like, done. Just going to take Enbrel for the next 60 years. I'm
Right.
good, And then when I
Yeah.
had the flare up and realized that it goes up and down, and you have to change your medications over time,
Mhm.
then I started really processing what had happened to me
Yeah.
before my diagnosis, and I felt it's taken me a long time. I harbor some feelings of I'm angry at the people who didn't listen to me. I'm angry at the fact that I had a delay in diagnosis. And at first I was hard to give myself permission to feel anger. I was like, no, you
Yeah.
should feel grateful because you at least got a
You have access to medicine now.
yeah. So like in your mind, like when you realized, or when she told you that like essentially it was like a slam dunk case of
Yeah.
PSA, um, I'm guessing you were relieved, but
There
also
was
probably like, what?
Yeah. So in the office, it was literally like sigh of relief and then flood of tears.
Oh,
Only because I have family members with PSA, so I know what it looks like, I had at that moment, it almost like it was like, okay, I'm so happy to have this confirmation that I'm not making this up, but also, oh crap, this isn't in my head. This is real. This is
yeah.
for real, for real. But like you said, I started on medication. So Humira worked so well, so quickly for about 5 months. And then it was like hard crash
Oh
because I was
no.
taking it by itself. And what my doctor and I have learned now is that I do better keeping methotrexate in the mix just so that my body can't form those antibodies. And she said it's very common in people who had delay in diagnosis because
Mm-hmm.
our diseases tend to get smarter while
Yeah.
while they're untreated because they can just kind of like roam about and yeah, grow and thrive.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you for thriving. The
Yeah,
cells that
please
are
stop.
attacking my immune system. Yeah. That my synovial lining. And yeah, no, I always say I was on Enbrel, and I was also on methotrexate. So I've been on methotrexate for
Okay.
19 years. And yeah, and I had this, it's so funny, so many similarities. I had the same experience with folic acid, like because folic acid isn't a prescription, I thought it
Hmm.
was kind of a nice to have, not need to have. And then one
Same.
week I was like, oh, I was like a week behind in refilling, and I'm like, no big deal. I'll just get it next week or something. And then I was like, why do I feel horrible? And then I
Yeah,
talked to my doctor. She's like, no, you actually, like, that's not just like a, hey, take fish oil. Like, that's like, you
right.
have to take folic acid. You have to
Yeah.
take it. So anyway,
Yeah,
for anyone
that
listening.
should be like it should literally come together in like
Yeah.
one package
Yeah.
so
That's a
that we
great point.
understand how important they are to go together. Yeah, if I had
Yeah.
known that the first time around, I might have lasted a little bit longer on it. But
Yeah.
um yeah, there was definitely a grieving process after the Humira failed because that's when I realized like this is a lifelong management situation. I don't get to just because I think unfortunately for us Americans too, we have these drug commercials that really fool us, you know? They make it look like, okay, you take your medicine and then you're going to be running through the fields with not a care in the world. And unfortunately, that is not the reality. Especially wasn't for me. It took 6 months on Cosentyx after Humira failed for it to kick in. And I was on really high doses of prednisone while I was waiting for that to
Okay.
kick in because my doctor's trying to prevent further joint damage. Like I don't have full extension of this arm anymore
Mm-hmm.
because of like I can't touch my shoulder.
Oh, wow.
That's
Yeah.
from lack of treatment. That's not going to
Yeah.
go away,
Yeah. That's the
unfortunately,
repercussions of,
of not treating. And
yeah.
that's another reason why I get very passionate about people sit being so black and white about holistic and not. You
Yeah.
got to do a little bit of both in my opinion because I tried both black and white ways and doing just one or just the other is not enough.
No, for most people, it's not. There are, it's estimated about 5% of people can sustain, or 3 to 5% can sustain
Mhm.
long-term remission for rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
And it's without Western medications. And, I think it's often posed as like these two equally valid options. And if you say, okay, I'm going to take either like this natural method versus this, oh, scary pharmaceutical, but you're not the evidence is so much stronger for the medications, not just in like each individual medication being shown to overall, like, again, on the population level, like individual results vary. Obviously, there are people who are on Humira for 11 years and feel great. Like in your case, it only lasted 5 months, but sorry, I forgot where my brain was originally going with that. I think was basically saying like, it's not like this one has a 50-50 chance and this one has a 50-50 chance.
Right.
It's like your odds are not in your favor to go full in on the holistic route. And that is a risk, even though it sounds like not a risk, because the medications have all these, disclaimers they have to put on to protect patients, so anyway, but yeah, so I know that
for me, I guess I came to a point where I was like, okay, yes, those side effects are scary, especially Humira. I think there's like a black box warning, something ridiculous. Like it can be intense, the idea of going on these medications, but I couldn't walk. Like my knee was so inflamed that I couldn't move. You have to, it comes down to like a pros and cons list, I guess, for some people. But in my case, I was literally looked dead in the eyes by my doctor and said, if you don't start this drug now, this is just going to get worse and worse.
Yeah. And that's where it becomes a lot more clear. But I think you and I have both, and by the way, for those listening, you should definitely check out Maggie's Arthritis _ Meggie Instagram, because you do a lot of great reels and videos, and we've both done ones about like medication shaming and not feeling, helping people not feel guilty for taking medications. It doesn't mean you failed, it means that you're taking steps to protect your health, just like lifestyle factors are really important, obviously, as an occupational therapist.
I think they should be like looked at the same way. I wish the culture would shift that way, because whenever I was first talking with friends and family about all of this and starting these medications after doing the holistic route, especially the shock and the, are you sure? And, it's, for me at this point in time, taking methotrexate and a biologic is just as healthy as hopping on a bike ride or having, a gluten-free meal or whatever you might think is the best thing for inflammation. It's so individual. And I really like the chronic pain nutritionist. Jennifer. She has such a great approach about that. I always recommend her for new, when people ask me about arthritis and nutrition. I think she has the right approach, because all of our bodies are so different. You really need to make it an individual journey about what, to cut in, cut out, what medicines work, what don't, what supplements work and what don't, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to make sure I give you some time to talk about, you mentioned earlier, you're really passionate about helping clear up misconceptions about PSA or psoriatic arthritis specifically. So that was one I didn't know until, I don't know, a few years ago, that you could have psoriatic arthritis without active psoriasis or even a history of psoriasis.
It's a very small percentage of people, not very small, I think it's like 30 or under percent about of PSA patients that have psoriatic arthritis symptoms before psoriasis pops up. And for me, I always had very dry skin. I probably had mild psoriasis growing up, but not enough for it to be alarming enough to, treat it. Definitely on like, my elbows and on my scalp. When I was in college, I was always having chronic itchy ears and I never knew why. And then I figured out after I got my PSA diagnosis, I went to the derm and she was like, you have psoriasis in your ear canals. Not a lot, but like inside here, I get flakes. So it hides. I thought that was really, I think that's just like so interesting. I am very passionate, about people knowing that you don't have to have lots of plaques, lots of psoriasis covering your body for it to be PSA. It seems to be that family history is key if you don't have the active psoriasis, but it can follow afterwards. I didn't have like really bad psoriasis on my scalp until after Humira failed. When Humira failed, it was almost like my immune system kicked it up a notch and they were like, okay, we're coming for you.
Now we're going to tell you for sure, in case you have any lingering doubts, it's not rheumatoid, it's psoriatic.
But I think mostly I just wish more people knew what psoriatic arthritis was in general. I mean, a lot of the times I get a blank stare. Societally, I think most people are aware of osteo, right? That's why we get those "you're too young" comments. And then secondly, I think people are more aware of RA. They know the deformities. They usually have had a family member or somebody in their lives that have experienced it to a degree. But mostly, I think everybody needs to know that every single arthritis patient experiences this disease differently. Whether it's OA, RA, PSA, JIA, no two people are the same. So I think that's where I wish the whole everybody would just don't compare. Like I
Yes.
know that it's a very natural human instinct to try to draw connection in a conversation when somebody says, "Oh, I have arthritis." You want to say, "Oh, so and so I know did this
Yes.
and that and the," and it comes from a good place most of the time, I think. But I wish people would listen more and educate more. So that's, I just wish there was more awareness of psoriatic arthritis and more than that, the fact that there are hundreds of types of arthritis. It's not just a little two or three here and there.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think the biggest misconception, which we've definitely talked about a little bit, is that like, you don't have to have the skin involvement. You can
Yeah.
develop the
Yeah.
joint pain first. So being aware of that can definitely help. And then, if you suspect that you might have, if you're in those early stages and you think, is this psoriatic arthritis, do some research, and there might be a psoriatic arthritis center or a rheumatologist that subspecializes in psoriatic arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my experience, I've learned that even some rheumatologists don't know enough about PSA.
Wow.
In my little hometown practice, unfortunately, that rheumatologist was mostly used to dealing with older patients with osteo. So that's
Mm-hmm.
their wheelhouse,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes you have to travel a little bit or do some research to find the right fit that's going to be the right rheumatologist for you, like subspecialized.
Yeah, no, that's super, super helpful. And when you're talking about the name of it, people hear the word arthritis, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, whether it's psoriatic, and they just think osteo often. And because
Mhm.
of that, and also when they hear psoriatic, they may just think, oh, well, like maybe you have one
Right.
joint that hurts and you have issues with your skin. But do you
Yeah.
ever use a different name? Like I know people with rheumatoid sometimes say, I have rheumatoid disease.
Yes.
Or so do you use
I
different
do
names
say
for?
that sometimes. I'll say
Yeah.
psoriatic disease sometimes, or sometimes I'll just say I have like an inflammatory joint condition,
Mm.
because
Uh,
that seems to like break it down for people a little bit better. I definitely agree. I think that when people hear psoriatic first, they are like looking at my skin and they're like,
yeah.
what does that have to do with your joints? But really it's like even calling it psoriatic arthritis, I feel like doesn't do enough justice, because and
No.
same with, it's a disease, it's a full body systemic disease for us. Like I have a running list in my phone of other specialists I have to see as a result: endocrinologist, cardiologist,
Yeah.
dermatologist.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Pulmonologist for
just
some. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't just stop at the joints and the rheumatology office. It's so beyond that for so many of us. And I think that's why it's such a sting and a sore spot when we get compared to osteo. No,
Yeah.
no hate there. It's just that it's a very different type of disease.
Yes.
I don't think that there's this. I could be wrong. I don't have I don't have experience in this myself, but I don't think that like the flu like fatigue and
No,
some
it's
of those systemic things that we deal with as RA or JA or inflammatory arthritis patients deal with. I don't think OA touches that in the same way.
yeah,
So
it
it
is
almost
interesting.
diminishes.
Yeah. No, so there is some, just FYI for those who might
Mhm.
have osteo who are listening, there is some there is some evidence emerging that it is semi-inflammatory, like more inflammatory.
Oh,
Osteo is more inflammatory than people realize, but it's definitely not a systemic disease in the same way that like people put psoriatic, arthritis, rheumatoid, ankylosing spondylitis in this umbrella of inflammatory arthritis, which confusingly people sometimes just get an inflammatory arthritis diagnosis that's actually from kind of like more like a reactive arthritis that's like short term from like a post viral or something like that. But the point is that any inflammation doesn't like to stay in one place, whether the
right.
inflammation's from these kind of diseases or something totally different. And so it can travel and cause a little bit of that. Like if it's from osteo, it can cause a little bit of the fatigue and stuff if it travels up to the brain, but it's just not the same degree.
Right.
I once actually talked to, I'll be honest, I talked to a fellow occupational therapist, someone very experienced. And I said something like, so many people don't realize that how systemic, rheumatoid arthritis is. And she's like, well, so-and-so, I'm not going to say who it was because it might to say who this person is, but they're like, well, my friend so-and-so has knee arthritis. And yeah, they're saying how tired they are after they play tennis because they have knee osteoarthritis. And I'm like, yes, if you have a knee osteoarthritis, you have to move your body differently, right? So you might have a little bit, it might be more tiring for you to do those activities, but that is not the same as your, entire immune system being completely out of whack and it happening to attack your joints in addition to other healthy tissue. And it is, it's hard because on the one hand, I'm always like advocating for occupational therapy and physical therapy, and like so many patients never get referred. And it's so important to have all
Always
the
have to
team.
ask, which
Yes.
drives me
Why do you
nuts.
have to
Why isn't
refer,
it being
ask?
offered?
But at the same time, I also like have heard other people who have experiences with physical therapists or occupational therapists who don't even like understand their disease. Unfortunately, we don't in my master's, we didn't spend a lot of time on inflammation. We spent like a million years on like stroke rehab, which is obviously really
Right.
important, or like multiple sclerosis even, which is really similar. Everything
Mhm.
about multiple sclerosis is similar to rheumatoid arthritis when it comes to fatigue and
Yeah.
cognitive symptoms. But it's like, oh yeah, just lump rheumatoid and psoriatic in with, one little
Mhm.
paragraph. Anyway, sorry, a little side
Well,
note,
that
but
actually, I was just gonna say, like, when I've been dealing with this insurance issues, I've been
oh
dealing with the
yes.
lumping, a lot of
Wow.
lumping together.
Yeah. Wait, so what does that mean for people who don't know?
So, okay, so, anybody who is listening who doesn't follow my page already,
Yeah.
a little recap. Since January, I have been struggling to get a new biologic. It is now April 25th,
I'm
okay?
so sorry.
So, it's been craziness. I've been stuck in step therapy limbo, and if you don't know what step therapy is, it's, basically your insurance can say, "Here, the lower cost drug, but we would like you to try," sometimes they'll have multiple steps. So my insurance has 3 steps. They want me to try 3 different, like, types of drugs before they'll allow me to access the more expensive one my doctor is actually prescribing, which drives me bonkers. Um, so they wanted me to try. I had failed Humira, right? And I'd been on Cosentyx for about 2 years and it's losing its efficacy, so trying to come off of it. But they don't care that I have failed Cosentyx because it's not one that they will provide anyways. So even though, and Cosentyx is an IL-17 or IL-23 inhibitor, one of those two. They now were like, you need to try Taltz, which is a cousin of Cosentyx. And I was already having some GI related issues to the Cosentyx, which can happen because, like we were saying, inflammation doesn't like to stay in one place. And so they've studied and found that those types of IL-17, IL-23 inhibitors can contribute to stomach upset and inflammation. So my doctor was really pushing for me to be able to try Cimzia for a couple of reasons. It's a different type of inhibitor. It's great for people in childbearing years. I might want to get pregnant in the next year or so. So, like, having that already in my system would be excellent. But I was denied on appeal. They said, no, you have to try our steps. So I tried Taltz about a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago, and I had a horrible reaction. I was so sick for like 10 days. I still have reaction site from it. Definitely a fail. Hard fail. My
I'm
doctor was like,
so
we're just
sorry.
throwing this one right out. So now I'm back to square one, and it's been almost 5 months of trying to get a biologic. And the scary part for me is that I know how detrimental this is to my health at this point in time. I know how much this is harming my body. Um, and I think the biggest issue with the insurance companies is that they lump us all together. They put us all in a box. They say, if you have
Yeah.
inflammatory arthritis, here are the drugs you can choose from. And it's like, well, hold on. We know from research that, certain certain types of arthritis respond better to certain types of inhibitors. Shouldn't this be a consideration? Shouldn't we break this down a little further? And even beyond that, everybody is so different. Why should some on staff physician for the insurance company be the one who gets to
Oh,
look over my file and decide, nah, that's not for you?
and it's not even always a physician. That's what's scary. So
Yeah.
first of all, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry you're going through that, because basically what it is you are suffering for no reason other than insurance companies to make more
Yeah.
money. And I really pride myself in seeing the gray areas and being able to kind of understand another point of view. And
Mhm.
I've looked into this issue really deeply. Like, I've gone to advocacy events with the Arthritis Foundation and the American College of Rheumatology, and it comes down to profit for insurance
Money.
companies. And the most generous explanation for this is that insurance companies are trying to do their part to rein in exorbitant healthcare costs in the United States.
And the
But
ironic part to me is that you turn around and the drug company is like, "Oh, so sorry they won't cover it. Here's a copay card.
oh yeah.
Can you lower your prices?"
No, yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I give the pharmaceutical companies a little bit of a pass on that because they're at least helping patients.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
you know,
totally.
when
It
you
just
go to med
that part just
school,
cracks me up a
yeah,
little bit.
no, it does crack me up too. Like, it's first do no harm.
Mhm.
Withholding a therapy, sorry, it happens with therapy too. So I'm like on my therapy, but with occupational therapy, it happens with psychological counseling, therapy. It happens on every level of the healthcare system. You know, we've got, when I worked in pediatrics, there's kids with autism being denied because, you know, you haven't shown enough improvement. Well, I'm sorry, this child with like complex issues isn't showing
Can't fit on your
the
little
yeah, your little chart. That's anyway. But so for, they're saying, oh well, we need to like, what they're trying to do is, the insurance companies are trying to say, we don't want anyone on these really good expensive medications like Humira, like Cimzia and stuff. We don't want them on the medications if they don't need to be, because that's contributing to this, you know, cost issue of like healthcare in the United States. And so you're like, right, but if a doctor who's treated your case, who's looked at your medical history, that's their, you know, they've gone to school for over 10 years to specialize in this. And then you get some random person who's never seen you,
Mhm.
never had, it's not ethical. It's extreme.
No,
It's extremely insulting, you know, to me
it
as a
is.
health provider to say that it goes against the entire spirit of healthcare, right? And
Yeah.
person-centered care and patient-centered care. You're
And I
taking,
feel
yeah,
like insurance, they're so big about, getting ahead of things. All they're doing is making me more sick. Now I have to go to a GI doctor
yeah,
because they forced me onto a medicine that my rheumatologist said, "This is going to hurt her.
yeah,
Please
without a
let her try
doubt.
something else."
Yeah, the
It's not
prices.
preventative at all.
No, and I asked that when I was in Washington, D.C. with the American
Mhm.
College of Rheumatology, and I was like, help me understand this. I really don't understand. Like, what is in it for the insurance companies?
Right.
Obviously, it's the profit, but I'm saying like, okay, with rheumatoid arthritis, when let's compare someone diagnosed in like 2022 with somebody diagnosed in 1980 when there was no effective treatments.
Mhm.
Those people diagnosed before the medications were guaranteed to have severe joint deformities to the point where they need joint replacement surgery. That's expensive. So the insurance
Yeah.
companies long term, I'm like, don't they realize they're shooting themselves in the foot anyway, because they're making the patients more sick? And you know what they told me? The advocates, these people who are experts who live in Washington, D.C. and lobby and advocate, they said they don't care because they only care about their quarterly profits, and also the fact that so it's all very complex. Insurance is tied to employment, and people no longer stay at the same employer for 30 or 40 years like they used to.
Right.
So they're like, yeah, so Cheryl's working at, you know, so-and-so school district getting insurance through there.
Mhm.
And then 2 years later, what I'm bearing the repercussion of the insurance company A's, you know, decisions. I'm then working for different companies, a different insurance, and they're bearing the brunt. So
Not their
anyway, sorry,
problem long
we're
term.
just,
That makes no, that totally makes sense. Thank you for bringing that up because I didn't really think about it from that perspective. I was so caught up in that how could this make sense for them? But
yeah.
that is it. And actually part of my whole issue that I've been in this, 5-month journey is because I had switched insurance providers. And
Oh
when you
yeah,
switch
I just
insurance
assumed
providers,
that.
it's almost like you
Yep.
have to start over. The doctor had to, they at first weren't even accepting that I had failed Humira because it was so long ago. I had to go back and get the records from my old rheumatologist because not only did I fail Humira, it gave me something called medication induced lupus symptoms. I was like really sick
Mm.
from it.
I'm so
So I had
sorry.
to go back, get those records, send that in just so they would take it because just my doctor's note saying she took this 2019 didn't work wasn't enough. They were like, yeah, that was a while ago. Let's have her try it again.
And there's like, oh wow, I know. Every time I think I have heard it all, it's so it's yeah, it's very frustrating. And
It's
I
like
think
I felt like I've been bullied, to be honest. Like I feel like
yes,
people who have no say in my medical care and they build these systems to make you feel small and powerless because they'll give you like an automated phone call being like your
hmm,
medication's been denied. Have your doctor call and write one of the scripts or they send you a letter in the mail and it's like it's not they're like trying to intimidate you is what it feels to me
yeah,
because I think the average patient is not first of all, I don't have a full-time job, luckily. I
hmm,
work
hmm,
part-time as a nanny and part-time doing freelance. So I have time to spend hours on hold with insurance. But for
Yeah.
most people, that's not an option. So they're just going to say, oh, well, I guess I'll just do this because this is what they're offering me. And I think that that's really messed up. I
It,
don't think that
it,
we should be pushed into medication choices that aren't the correct choices simply for what, pennies at the end of the day. Because let's be real, aren't all biologics relatively the same price?
I don't, yeah. I think it's that it's such insulting. I can't think of a better word, and frustrating experience to feel like I'm going to receive healthcare, and the point of healthcare is to alleviate my symptoms as much as possible and improve my quality of life. And it's almost like you're starving and you're sitting down to dinner, and then the chef is like, here's all the stuff I think you need. And like, let's say you're sick, let's say, think even more obvious of a connection, like you're really sick and you're like, these are the foods that are going to help you. And then insurance comes by and says, you only get that one, or you
Yeah.
don't get any of these. Go get something from the dollar store. And you're like, what? Like,
Right.
why? So this is why a for-profit healthcare system, I'm kind of like a weird, like, I'm still figuring out my thoughts on, capitalism, everything like that. But it's the one thing that's become very apparent in the United States is that a for-profit health system is never, ever going to benefit the patients. And unless there's some more severe, like, restrictions on it. And so, that we are at the mercy of in the United States of the insurance company's profit motive. Yeah.
I feel like our insurance company was specifically designed for a healthy person. They want somebody who's going to pay
like, why do you have these issues?
$500 a month just in case, and then like go to their, regular annual visits. And then somebody like me comes along and they're like, oh, wait, you actually need medical care. We don't want to do anything about that. Sorry.
So, I know.
Yeah.
Totally. And I actually, I want to ask, because I think a lot of people who are young who get diagnosed with, a form of autoimmune arthritis are like worried about how it's going to affect their future. Like, how about dating? Am I going to be able to, get married or have a job? And so can you share a little, like, how did you meet your husband, and how's he been through, or how has it been navigating your health issues, with relationships?
We met in New York City on a dating app.
Oh, yay.
And at that point, I was like not flaring at the time that we met. He knew I had history of arthritis and I had some joint issues because I was going to like nonstop PT still at that point, always trying to get my elbow and my knee aligned. And he is excellent. Whenever he comes with me to all of my appointments. He was there when I got diagnosed. He's been there for every knee draining, which, like, kudos to him because those are gross.
I've never had that, but I've heard stories from you and from Allie another day with RA. Yeah.
Luckily, knock on wood, since I've started biologics and methotrexate together, I have not had a massive knee issue. But dating and arthritis, I could totally see how that would be an intimidating topic because, you kind of, your significant other at times becomes like a built-in caretaker, and they have to be up for that. Not everybody is. So I kind of got lucky, I guess, in a way. Like, my husband's a sweetheart, and also we formed a relationship before my arthritis got as severe as it did. So he kind of like watched the whole thing snowball. But I think, you just need open communication. I try to tell him as often and whenever possible, like, thank you for all of your help. I really, really appreciate it. I always let him know if I'm having a high pain day, because whether we realize it or not, I think sometimes you can be a little snappier when you're in pain.
Oh, totally.
Or like, and like your significant other is your person. So that's who you're going to unintentionally probably take that out on.
Totally.
So, just having open communication and talking about it. And I always encourage him, if he ever feels like he needs to do counseling, because I did counseling after getting diagnosed. Because I think it's crucial. Honestly, your life changes so much. And it was even more of a confusing one for me because I lived my whole life with what I thought was arthritis. And then as an adult, it became this whole new beast that I had never experienced. So, I did counseling. I always encourage him, if he ever feels like he gets to the point where he would like to talk to somebody, either both of us or on his own. I think that's, you have to be able to just talk about it. And it's very freeing to talk about it. I spent up until, 27 years old, barely telling anybody about my arthritis. And then I made my page, and it like completely changed my outlook, my perspective, my ability to thrive with arthritis. I really think that having community makes such a difference.
Wow. Okay. So that's fascinating because yeah, when I see you now, I only know you as like a
Right.
confident advocate.
Yeah.
And you're like the second person this week to tell me that, you actually, there's somebody in my Room to Thrive group currently that she's in her older years. I'm not going to say the age, but she said she's lived over 50 years with arthritis and just now is starting to tell people. So I will say for anyone listening, it's never too late to become
Yeah, it's never
comfortable.
too late. When I was younger, it was hard because I mean, I spent a lot of time in remission, so I don't think I really even understood the reality of it for so long. I was
Yeah.
very little when I had dealt with the painful part, to the
Yes.
point where I don't really remember it. I do remember going to
Mhm.
hospitals and, getting lollipops after shots and things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely always a good idea to speak up and speak your truth and let it out, because you might just help one other person. Every time, it doesn't happen to me very often. I don't have some grand following on Instagram, but
Oh,
I have a little bit of a
I love
community
your
building here.
yeah. Sorry.
And anytime I get a message from somebody that says like, "I'm so glad I found your page," or your content really helps me, it is just everything. It's everything. It feels like, okay, the insurance company might make me feel small and helpless, but I can do this. I can put my voice out there and I can help people on like a ground level, because going up to Washington's freaking awesome. I would
Yeah.
love to get to that point in my advocacy journey. Like, that is definitely on the 5-year plan. I want to get out there and start fighting harder. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, just talking a little bit about it can make a big difference.
Oh my gosh. And so I totally agree with that. And I want to make sure, I don't know why I'm like stuck on the timeline. So you got diagnosed with psoriatic
Yes.
arthritis in 2019 and
Hmm.
you started counseling after that.
Hmm.
And then when did you start making your page and opening up about your condition like publicly?
So I think I started my page in like the end of summer of 2020. End of summer 2020. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and
And it
that's
was through
interesting timing.
counseling, and
Yeah.
actually I wrote a Bezzy article about like my post-diagnosis journey, because
Okay.
I did the whole diagnosis journey, but then I think the after diagnosis is almost more important for a lot of people. It's like how you're going to go about the rest of your life with this.
Right.
And for me, the timing of the COVID lockdown came perfectly for me. I
Mm-hmm.
needed to rest so badly, and I at the time was working as a Montessori preschool teacher. I don't know if you know about
Okay.
Montessori,
I
but you
do.
have to sit on the floor with them
You're
and get
down
up
on the
and down, up
ground.
and down, up
Yeah.
and down. Yeah, that wasn't going so well. And
Yeah.
that was in that Humira fail portion of time before Cosentyx. So when the pandemic hit, I had time to sit with my thoughts and myself and reflect. And that's when I really was like, okay, this is way bigger than I thought it was. And this is going to be about me taking care of me. Like, nobody else is going to do this for me. I need to become my best advocate. Um, like, whether that means telling my doctor, no, I don't agree with that decision. Please write that in my notes that I asked for this.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to do it. Whether it's doing my own research or being aware of new treatments, or just simply telling people about psoriatic arthritis.
Yeah, ab- absolutely. And I think, I really do think there's quite a few of us who really leaned into our storytelling and connecting in 2020, which
Yes,
again, like you said,
just
makes
having
sense,
that time.
having the
Yeah,
time and then also realizing that if we can't connect in person, online is such a lifeline, right? And
amazing. It's been
yeah,
life-changing for me, honestly. I have
me
like
too.
formed so many wonderful friendships through Instagram. And it's interesting because, social media does get such a bad rep, and I get it. There are some
Mhm.
horrible aspects to it. But for the chronically ill community, I think it is a lifeline for sure. I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
It can be, having somebody that's just like checking in on you, or having somebody to vent to where you really truly don't feel like you're complaining because they get it,
Yes. Yes.
little
It's
things.
yeah. I think that like there's a lot of shame people carry and even me. So I just posted on my Instagram stories about camping this weekend and I was excited to go. And like, I so wanted to be like, what I wanted to happen is after going camping, I wanted to be able to have that success story and be like, I
Mhm.
used all my tools and it was great. And it wasn't great, except the sleeping wasn't great. Everything else was great about it. But I had this shame, like I must not have tried hard enough. And a part of it is justified because I forgot my amazing battery heated socks. I've made videos about my
Oh,
battery heated socks. I just
that's
forgot
so
my own
incredible.
tool. I forgot to bring my tool. Like, so
But
I was
that's
like,
like the moments where you're just like, you have to take a step back and remember, like, I'm only human. And
exactly.
most humans who go on a camping trip don't need to pack 15 other things. When I went on a 2-week road trip a few weeks ago, I had an entire second suitcase of arthritis stuff.
Oh, totally. Yes. And it's like, and I'm like, so, and I feel like when I share those moments of vulnerability and again, being like, oh my gosh, I shame myself so often. I'm like, you literally like created this job for yourself of being an arthritis educator and, program creator and support group leader and influencer. And you can't even remember your socks. Like I was literally just shaming myself. And this is what,
Yeah.
you're freezing
No,
cold in
it's
the middle of the night. You can't
right.
sleep. And
You're
I
not
was like,
thinking logically.
totally. But then I was like, you know what? Like I'm a human being. It's okay. And I seen other people like Brene Brown and like who say, like she's like the expert in shame, and
Yeah.
vulnerability. And she's like, sometimes it's like seeing people who share not just like my success story about
Yeah.
arthritis, but also the little fails and little mistakes we make. It makes us all connect as actual human beings,
Totally. Yeah. I think that those real moments are when you get like the most out of people too. It's when you are I posted a video of a reel a few months back of like, me crying and then smiling and the ups and
Oh,
downs. And it's when people are like, yeah, same, honestly. Like
yeah. Yeah.
when you get it's very hard to be vulnerable, put yourself out there in ways like that, but it's also very freeing.
Totally. And I wanted to circle back because you mentioned that you'd be interested in going to Washington, D.C. I don't want to
Yeah.
forget to say this. So interestingly, as anyone knows me, who knows me will know, I'm not shy about telling my story and talking to anyone. But I was nervous and I don't get
Oh,
nervous very often. I should get nervous more. I was nervous to share my story. I don't normally get nervous about that. I get nervous about other things, but to share my story at my state legislation level in Washington State where I live. And I realized that the reason is that I find the whole legislative process like really intimidating and
mhm.
overwhelming. And again, I feel like there's so much like this person's right. No, that person's right. The thing that I'll tell anyone who's kind of scared about that process is that you don't have to literally figure it out on your own. Like you can go through the patient advocacy organizations. Like in my case, I've gone through um, um, uh, Arthritis Foundation and Creaky Joints.
Mhm.
There's also American College of Rheumatology. American College of Rheumatology paid my plane ticket and hotel to go to Washington, D.C. Like that's part of their budget for patient advocacy. Same with Arthritis Foundation. They paid for me to be an advocate at the American College of Rheumatology conference, which wasn't as much about legislative advocacy, but it was about sharing my story. And so like I'm, indebted to these organizations they not only gave me, it wasn't just like, here's a plane ticket in a hotel room. They also trained me. So a lot of times I'll have these advocates for arthritis events where it's like, this is in the pre-COVID days, but where you go a day before you're going to meet with your legislator and or representatives and you or their staff, and they train you for a whole day. Like these are the issues, and literally talking about in the American College of Rheumatology one, it was a room full of nurses, doctors, and patients, like all together, and physical therapists, occupational therapists, everyone all together, social workers, learning this is why step therapy is bad. This is,
Mhm.
and this is why these are our talking points. So they teach you, like, this is the thing we want to say to our legislators. So you don't, but you can on your own, of course, feel empowered, and you can write a letter or call your legislator anytime. But the American College of Rheumatology and Arthritis Foundation and Creaky Joints, they have these kind of campaigns that they have people, as a nonprofits on their staff to make it really easy for you. So I'll put some links in the comments in the show notes for that. So I would love to come to New York and meet you someday, like
Yes.
in person. That would be
Yes.
amazing.
I would
But
love I'm like dreaming someday if we can, I don't know,
yes.
when it will feel safe enough.
Well,
to do a meetup.
yes, I'm going to do an Arthritis World Tour,
Ah,
which all I have so far is the concept, but it's a pretty catchy name, right?
I
Arthritis
love
World
it.
Tour.
Yes,
Just going to go around the world and talk to people with
and talk
arthritis.
about arthritis.
Yeah. So circling back to sharing your story, can you tell the audience a little more about Bezzy, PSA and how you got involved in that? Cause it's really
Yeah,
cool.
it's great. So yeah, so Bezzy PSA, Bezzy has all different apps. They've got one for breast cancer, rheumatoid arthritis. They just started one, I believe, like 2 weeks ago for just psoriasis for the
Oh,
folks
nice.
who don't have the arthritis portion. And it's an app that you can do. There's like live chats every couple nights. There's forums. You can make a profile and like connect with other people. I do writing for their like explore page. They do a lot of perspective pieces and some how-tos. So I've done like a Spoonie gift guide, and I talked about your group and your program.
Thank you.
And I've done my most recent one that I submitted that should be coming out soon was like 3 reasons why psoriatic arthritis is hard to diagnose.
Yeah. And it's free for those that don't know.
Yes.
So it's
It is free.
and it's from
And
healthline.com, which I am like a freelance writer for Healthline as well. And, they are good at medically validating their articles, and you might wonder, well, why is it free? A lot of these pages or a lot of these free resources and the websites, they either run ads or they do sometimes de-identify your information and sell it to, third parties. So that is just something, I know for some people that's important. For me, I'm like, if it's de-identified, that's fine with me. Like, they don't know who I am.
Yes.
But for
that's important information.
But I might be naive. So maybe some other people are like, they can still track you. And so, I have notifications unenabled for most of my apps, but I did turn them on for the Bezzy RA. And it's really nice to see something pop up. Like today we're talking about, like, one of them was podcasts about rheumatoid arthritis. And I was like, oh, I'm going to chime in there and be like, hey, check out my podcast and learn about other ones. Like, there's actually a lot of podcasts that talk about arthritis. Or there's other ones where it's about some of the real life stuff, that I talk about as a OT and, things about like dating, like everything we talked about today.
Yeah. Bezzy's really cool. I'm very excited about what they're putting out there. And I think it creates just another level of community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, one of my favorite questions to ask kind of before we wrap up is, what advice do you have for newly diagnosed people with PSA and similar conditions? Yeah.
I love this one. Okay.
This is the 100,000 question, right?
Yeah. So I would say number one, if you decide to do your own research, be careful with what you are reading. I love Creaky Joints is a great resource because they take great information and they put it out in a way that we can understand. The Arthritis Foundation also has pretty good information. And like you were talking about the American College of Rheumatology, I just find Creaky Joints the most like accessible as a non-medical background person. I love whenever I have a question or concern regarding arthritis, I usually go to them first. So if you're going to research, just be mindful of what you're consuming. Google can be a scary place, especially when you're newly diagnosed and there's a lot of information out there. So yes, that would be my number one tip is tread carefully with self-research. Find community because like I've talked about, like, just having your people who really understand it. It feels different talking to somebody with your condition than it does even like your mom or your best friend. It just, for some reason, there's a different level of comfort and connection. And another thing I would say is always in the weeks and days leading up to an appointment, start taking notes of what's going on, concerns, questions, symptoms, anything, and start like, don't do it like the night before because your brain tends to self-sabotage a little bit, I think, when you're thinking too hard about something. So I like to try like, leading up to really every morning, taking what's going on, how am I feeling, what can I let the doctor know, so that you can continue to be your own best advocate because you're the one that lives in your body every day. So
yeah,
that
makes perfect sense. And do you do it? Do you use like a symptom tracking app or do you have like a paper journal or how do you track?
I use That Girl with Arthritis.
Oh, yes.
Symptom journal. And she's actually putting out new covers, I think in a couple of days, if maybe next week. She posted something yesterday. Her journal is great. I don't have it by me right now. It's in my bedroom, but it's got a little area to talk about the weather of that day, what symptoms you're feeling, your regular to-do list, it can help you track what you've been eating, all of that.
Yeah.
And I used it very intensely for a few months to get like a better idea. And I tend to bring it back out when I'm flaring again. But if I'm feeling okay, I'm not
Yeah.
as great with the journal.
No, that's how, in a way, actually, that's, to me, it's an indication that my health has gotten better when
Yeah,
I've stopped tracking as assiduously, because
right.
I
You're like,
realized
you're not as,
you're not triggered too.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, you're like stepped out of your arthritis brain for a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it's, cause so many of us really experience, brain fog or cognitive challenges with memory when it comes
And
to,
and
yeah.
even just like, medical trauma, like being in a doctor's office can be intimidating, and all of
Yeah.
those lovely thoughts that you had prepared and things you want to say just blank, gone.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
nice to have that written down. And I will add, if you have a doctor that doesn't want to take time to listen to your questions and concerns, probably find a new doctor.
Yeah. Second opinions are more accessible than ever with telehealth, is what I tell
Yes,
people too. They're like, oh, there isn't
utilize
any other one.
telehealth.
If there's not another
Amazing.
one in your city, see if there's a telehealth one that you can
Mhm.
see virtually, or maybe drive to them just for like when you need that physical
Yeah.
exam.
So my doctor is in New York City, which is like an hour and a half drive from me, but I go in like quarterly for in-person
Hmm.
appointments, and the rest is virtual and through the messenger, which is pretty
Yes.
awesome.
So awesome. Yeah. And is there anything else, you have this platform now to share? We've gone on our soapboxes already, but
I
is there
know. I
anything
feel
else?
like
I know we feel like we covered everything.
I
Jeez.
really do feel like we covered everything.
Yeah.
I would, just again, if you are feeling not well, don't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
That's the moral of my story basically is I knew something was wrong. I knew these doctors weren't giving me their best, but I let it get into my head, and you have to keep pushing. Keep pushing until you
Yeah.
get somebody that says, "Yep, something's going on here," until you get what you need. Don't let anybody silence your pain, because you live in your body every day. So you're the expert on your body, on what's going on.
Oh, that's really, really powerful. And there's so many times I know that I've said it's a little bit of a mixture of like denial. Like I don't want my condition to be getting worse. Right.
Sure,
So if I'm
yeah,
starting to feel like, oh, my biologic might be wearing off, or my body's creating antibodies. So maybe, I like kind of ignore it. Sometimes I'm like, maybe it'll just be a little blip. It's a little mini
right.
flare and it'll get better. But, or I also like, the barriers for me are like either just wanting, like, denial and wanting things to be better than they are, and then wanting to be a good patient, like wanting to
Sure.
be like,
Yeah,
have you read Joan Didion's like The Year of Magical Thinking?
I haven't.
It's really good. It's about the year after her husband passed away. And she talked about how like, she heard as her husband was like dying, this is my memory of it. The phrase that she heard like a social worker use is like when talking, overheard a social worker talking to another one about her husband and their situation, and, that he's dying, and he was like handing off the care to the next social worker. He's like, don't worry, she's a cool patient. Like, she's cool, and it was like weird. You think, okay, that's like random to say, but like she latched onto that. Like, I want to be the
Yeah,
cool patient. I want to be, and that's totally me. I want to be like the good patient. I want to be
yeah.
the success story. And you feel like you failed, right? When
Right.
your
Right.
condition
Yeah. When
isn't
you have to
showing.
come to your doctor. I mean, for me, it was like I saw my doctor in the end of August, early September, and she was like, this, like almost afraid to say the MR, medical remission, like I was
Yeah.
getting there. And then less than 3 months later, I had to call in and be like, hey,
Oh,
Cosentyx isn't working so much anymore.
it's
So
so hard.
it's hard because, yeah, you feel like I've achieved this like moment, and then not so much.
Yeah. And then when you don't have that validation of a diagnosis, it's even harder, right? Because then
Yes.
you're like, well, everyone's telling me. But yeah, that's something I really wish I had done earlier, is really trusted myself and my body,
Yeah.
because I we did go to quite a few different people to get second opinions and everything, but they still kept being like, you're just anxious, you're just a
Hmm.
hypochondriac. And then it just kind of like,
You start to internalize it. It's really
yeah.
hard not to. Yeah,
But I'm
it's
like, nobody
unfortunate.
wants to be sick, especially in the pandemic,
No,
right? Like, nobody wants
no,
to go.
nobody wants to be put on. I'm on 3 immunosuppressants right now. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
nobody wants this
Well, and
life.
I remember once being like, it's a really, extremely frustrating and sad experience to be like, I'm actually underreporting my pain and being treated as if I'm over reporting. Like, and
Mhm.
my doctor knows now. She's like, when Cheryl says, oh, it's, it's not that, it's kind of bad, but it's not that bad. She knows that means it's like terrible,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm about to die, so.
And I think that's another good, like important point too, is like developing a relationship with a doctor is so key for chronic illness of any kind, because really we need continuous care for a very long time. So if you can get somebody that's going to be like your partner and is going to be collaborative with you and not just say, this is what you need to do, more like, how about, what do you think about this option?
Totally.
Because you should be respected as the patient, like this is your life and your body. You shouldn't just be going to this expert and them telling you this, that, and that, and goodbye. It should be a partnership because it's so long term.
It really is. I know I'm really lucky. I encountered my amazing rheumatologist right after she was done with residency. So she was new, but she did have all the latest research and she was on top of it. And so I'm like, as long as you don't move away from Seattle or, this state, I'm following you, wherever. So having that relationship, it's so key. Like the first thing she asked me in the appointments, like, show me a picture of your son or show me a picture of your dog. And then we just did like a house remodel. She's like, show me your house. Like she actually cares who I am as a person, and that's huge. And some people may not. It's about getting what you want out of it. Some people are like, actually, I'm overwhelmed right now. Just tell me what to do. That's kind of how I was postpartum.
Very good point.
But anyway, thank you so much. This has been, I feel like I could talk to you for 5 hours.
No, I will do live for sure.
Yeah, we'll do a live. And then can you just tell people listening where they can find you? I'll put the links in the show notes too. But
so my Instagram and my TikTok are both arthritis_Meggie. I need to get better about posting to TikTok. Classic millennial.
I'm an elder millennial. I'm like on the border of, I was born 1981. So I'm like the youngest of Gen X or the oldest millennial.
I'm like a true millennial.
You're a true millennial. Yeah. Okay. So
I have a Facebook page for Arthritis Meggie as well. And you can find me on the PSA Bezzy app.
Yeah. Awesome. Is it, are you listed as, your full name?
My name is listed as Meaghan Queeran.
Okay. Perfect. Is that Irish?
It is.
Okay, cool.
My last name is actually not Irish. My first name is Meaghan, extremely Irish. My dad is technically his last name is Murphy, but he was adopted.
Oh, so, okay. Oh,
Meaghan Murphy. Very Irish.
I love that. M squared. Awesome. Yes. Well, thank you so much. This has been really, I know it takes emotional labor to tell your story and share, the challenges you've had and how you have persevered. So I know there's people listening who are going to feel more empowered after listening to this. So thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. So good to talk.
Yay. Bye for now.
Bye.